Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today to discuss about utility of blockchain technology, moving away from the speculative markets that we see today of cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin was not made to be just a speculative gambling asset. Right now, what is happening will be known in 10 years down the lane as the great crypto bubble, just like we know the 2000 bubble as the great dot-com bubble. Because it's not grounded in utility, and there are many thousands of blockchain, but there are not even 10 good applications. The reason for this is that there's an incentive to create another blockchain with another token and get rich quick, because that's much easier to do rather than build on strong value foundations and grounded in utility. The current transactions, the maximum transactions right now happening on any blockchain is Bitcoin SV, with current 60% of all transactions in a single day compared to all the other blockchains, and it's consistent. And this is going to increase because we have a solution of scale that powers us to achieve an internet of data where we have all the solutions powered by blockchain done on the Bitcoin SV blockchain, because we don't need any other blockchain which has just been made as a speculative market. What is the utility really is that we have a single triple entry accounting ledger. This ledger is a self-auditing ledger, which is the evolution of the double entry ledger which we have in banking. In banking right now, it's double entry. And we have separate books of records for different banks, and not just banks, because it goes beyond money. It goes into asset tracking. Any transfer from one database to another database, they're not linked. It's all data silos into different databases, which are not linked. So what a triple entry ledger does is there's a linking record on the ledger which links the multiple records which are separate. So it provides you with a data integrity and provides a fraud removal which wasn't there before the triple entry system. There's more than just triple entry. Bitcoin, the name itself suggests you that it is bit plus coin. It's a merger of the data and the monetary value for data combined into a single protocol to create the data economy of the internet. This is what is missing, and this is what will be happening as we use the internet. The protocol for the payments made by Bitcoin, which was not there before. In HTTP, there was this error code 402 because it didn't exist. The technology didn't exist at that time to have micropayments on the internet. But now, with Bitcoin SV, we do have the restored original vision of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Satoshi vision, which enables the peer-to-peer data economy. A data network is powered by the protocol at the level like HTTP is. And we also have a scripting language which enables us to get all the smart contract capabilities to make financial instruments on data as well. The internet stack and Bitcoin merges with that as a base layer, on top of which we build the data economy. Bitcoin was called TimeChain by the creator. And why is that? Look at the white paper. It calls it a timestamp server, a distributed timestamp server. Particularly, even in the references, if you see, go to the multiple references, how to timestamp a digital document. This is the story of Bitcoin, how it began. About data integrity, how you have that of a digital document on the internet. Going on, we introduced the concept of how reliability of a digital timestamp Merkle tree structure could be used, which Bitcoin adopted. And Satoshi mentions in the TimeChain word, in the Bitcoin code and comments, multiple times, because that's what it is. It is a record which multiple miners are witnessing, and timestamping it in time so that it cannot be changed. And that's a much better way to understand what the blockchain really is. Joining me here is Kurt. He's the Bitcoin historian who is also going to talk to me about his story, about how he joined, and he has been from 2011. He has seen the evolution of the journey of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin got suffocated, got deviated from the protocol. Many changes were brought in, but many changes were restored back as it went back to the original vision, and how Bitcoin SV was born. Over to you, Kurt.
Thank you, Rohan. I appreciate it. And you look good up on stage. Glad to see you live here from Miami. And I want to apologize to the audience. I was supposed to be there today, and my visa was denied. So I was very disappointed not to be with you there, everyone. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. If we go back to the earliest days, so 2008 and 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto claimed to solve computer science problems that had not been solved ever. There were many attempts to solve these problems, but it was never quite done. So when he did it, obviously there were critics. In fact, the very first person to respond to Satoshi Nakamoto when he posted on Halloween 2008, October 31st, 2008, he posted, "Hey, I've solved the double spend problem," and linked to the white paper and a couple other things. And the first response is from a character named James Donald. And James Donald told him what is essentially today the BTC Bitcoin narrative, that, well, this can't scale, everyone's going to need to run their own node, and all these other things. And it's funny because Satoshi responded to him and essentially laughed at him. And he laughed at him because it was so short-sighted. But today, now 13 or almost 14 years later, the response is that's what BTC is. BTC is essentially James Donald's vision. And Satoshi Nakamoto, people continue to try to forget who Satoshi Nakamoto is and what he created and the problems that he solved with Bitcoin. Because if you can solve the problem of allowing a distributed consensus, allowing computers to be able to calculate valuable data and monetize that data across a network without a central authority, without a central actor determining the state of truth, the truth of that global ledger, well, you can solve all kinds of other problems. You can solve problems of things like notaries or anything where a third party would have to attest to the existence of something. And so there were lots and lots of critics. And I think at first it was critics from a purely academic standpoint. But over time, and actually pretty quickly, by the time Satoshi Nakamoto was left the project, this is in late 2010, early 2011, ultimately it was people from the big payments companies. And the big payments companies looked at Bitcoin just the same way that any company would look at a disruptive new, let's say a startup company, right? So let's say you're a drug company and you make money selling pharmaceuticals to an industry. And if somebody invents something that undercuts your profits by 99% and eliminates your control of the industry, a large company is likely to buy that startup, patent whatever they've created, and maybe roll out changes slowly, but ultimately shelve things for a little while. And I think this is very clearly what MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, and sort of the payments companies of the day did in Bitcoin. They started an incubator called Digital Currency Group, using money from Old Wall Street and Silicon Valley, and basically figured out how to pay developers, pay infrastructure companies, pay wallet companies, and get these people to treat Bitcoin as an asset that people could invest in. There's some excitement about that it'll absorb value, it'll go up in price, all the things that you hear about Bitcoin. But we're gonna shelve all of this disruptive stuff. We do not want people to realize that they don't need to use a credit card gateway, they don't need to pay fees to access a terminal, that they don't need to ask for permission and wait days for ACH payments, SWIFT payments, FedWire. and some of the other things that people do to send money around. Even MoneyGram and Western Union, these companies were made obsolete with the creation of Bitcoin, and yet they persist today. And they persist today because if you follow the money, you can follow the money right back to Silicon Valley. You can find it at companies like Andreessen Horowitz, and again, Digital Currency Group. But Digital Currency Group is really just a conglomeration of Bain Capital, Silver Lake Capital, and a couple other venture firms. Then you can look at AXA Insurance and other players in the space that invested heavily in the creation of companies like Blockstream Corporation, Lightning Labs, and then exchanges like Kraken and Coinbase to get people to have a place where they can gamble, where they can speculate on coins. And I did a little bit of research on the way that India looks at this sort of behavior, and the behavior is looked down upon so much that regulations are very, very tight. It is the behavior of these people to make people think of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as essentially the same thing, as some sort of, again, a gambling asset, but that's not really what it was ever designed to be. This was created by large American tech investment firms to make people say, you know what, we're just not going to go that way. We're going to stick to the way that we stuck to things for years, and go use your MasterCard, use Venmo, use Zelle, use PayPal, use all of these payment vectors that exist today. And so ultimately the slowing down of Bitcoin, the way this was done is companies like Blockstream said, okay, we're going to make sure that Bitcoin stays very, very slow, but we want it to be extremely secure. At the very least, we want people to think that it's very secure. And then what we will do is we will offer a credit card payment program. So we get Bitcoin, BTC in this case, to sit in custodial wallets. So that creates a business model for custodians also, which is great. You put money, or you put BTC with a custodian, and then you distribute them a MasterCard. And you say, here's your Coinbase Visa, or here's your MasterCard from BitPay, or whoever it's going to be. And ultimately, you're keeping these third-party intermediaries, you're keeping these little fees that go in between banking institutions and payments institutions, and you allow them to retain your control while telling people, making people feel like they are being disruptive. And they feel like they're being disruptive because they're being rewarded with a rise in price, essentially. If you bought Bitcoin in 2012 or 2013, somebody like me, it's pretty hard to say, wow, I've gotten very wealthy and I'm also somehow wrong. But truly, the disruptive aspect of Bitcoin is not its ability to absorb value. Bitcoin does absorb value. Absorption of value of lesser assets is certainly a function of a good money. But the real value of Bitcoin, and the value of Bitcoin that has only narrowly been explored, and the value that I challenge you to look for greater opportunities within, is its ability to create excess value. This is what a real economy is supposed to do.
That's how Bitcoin is going to now disrupt the data economy. And Bitcoin, BTC, how it moved off-chain, the transactions, we totally lost the main utility of the triple entry accounting ledger, which Bitcoin was supposed to be. If you go off-chain, none of the benefits you get of going on-chain. And it's replicating the banking system with the checking accounts, with Lightning hubs being like bank accounts, which you have money checked in. So it's no longer behaving as the cash system it was made to be.
Absolutely.
That's coming also to scale. The whole point was to scale, we need to scale the block size. That was the block size, the great block war, the block size debate that happened. Tell us about that one.
So yeah, in 2014 and 15, once the money was firmly in the hands of certain groups of developers, the debate got very strong. Is Bitcoin a payments technology, or is it a savings technology? The people that wanted savings technology, the BTC people, they wanted to keep small blocks because they want everybody to be able to validate transactions at the expense of not allowing everybody to be able to spend transactions on the network because they can't afford the fees, which to me always sounded like a crazy trade-off to make. The big blockers, they believe that infrastructure participants in the network should be commercial, that they should be professional industry participants that allow users unfettered access. So allowing normal people everywhere in the world, it doesn't matter if you live on $1 a day or $1 million a day, you should be able to make a transaction on the Bitcoin network because it will be processed professionally. And so there were multiple camps. I don't want to go too deeply into the history because we'll get into the weeds very quickly. But ultimately, the side that wanted Bitcoin to be used as both a simple money, a simple currency, or allow nations to be able to distribute tokenized currency upon it, or put everything from personal data, business data, titles, title transfer, and all kinds of things like that. Those are the big blockers. These are the people that are here on your stage. Rohan and myself are big blockers. We want Bitcoin to give transparency and reduce friction across the entire economy by putting everything into a database that anyone can read.
And that certainly cannot happen when Bitcoin, in suffocated form, has high transaction fees, which is a big problem with all the blockchains right now. Most of the blockchains have transaction fees that are ridiculous, and they cannot be used for the micropayments that we are talking about, for the data economy at all, which Bitcoin was supposed to do. Ethereum itself, made as the smart contract engine for the entire world, faces the problem of high transaction fees. And this is the blockchain scaling debate that has existed since the 2017, around which it was born, when we had a huge demand in using the Bitcoin ledger. And the entire utility of the ledger is to have a demand for the ledger. That's where you get the value of Bitcoin from. If there's no demand for the ledger, there's no value of Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is used to pay for the transaction fees for the ledger. And what was done was suffocate the supply of the ledger space to increase and earn from the transaction fee market that was created. But when you scale the block size, you don't need to be having a suffocated block size because it's just like email is. Like email, imagine the email protocol, which is also peer-to-peer, just like Bitcoin is. If you suffocate the entire world's email that happened in 10 minutes to only 1 MB total, obviously it has a restriction about how many emails can be sent. And obviously email wouldn't have scaled. We wouldn't have used email in that professional scale, which it is currently, if it was just like Bitcoin, suffocated. So Bitcoin SV restoring the protocol, and now we are also moving towards the Terranode implementation, which is moving towards 1 terabyte blocks. We have come a long way from 1 megabyte, and now we are consistently doing 500 megabytes average, and with the record blocks also going to around, the biggest block has been around 4 GB, 3.8 GB. And we will keep scaling, and right now we achieve a scale of more than 50 to 100,000 transactions per second is possible. And when Terranode comes about in this year, we'll be going even beyond 100,000, and it can have unbounded scaling. So this really solves the blockchain scalability problem that exists, because all the transactions are parallelized and can be processed in blocks. As cash system is all processed parallelly. So what is the dream of Ethereum to implement sharding is actually already done by the Bitcoin blockchain, because all UTXOs can be 100% sharded, because all can be processed parallelly. And there is a lot of reasons we'll get down to, and bring about a world of micropayments, which is the metanet. And this is different from Web3, which is currently the popular term. It is similar, but the sense of difference is that we have a scaling blockchain of Bitcoin itself used to own the data, for users to own the data and transact and move data, have a data economy going on with micropayment applications. There are many misconceptions that I'll have Kurt also address, which comes down to how can a blockchain be without Bitcoin? That is also a thing. And then go on to address also about the store of value narrative, particularly that is very prevalent.
Would you like me to do one at a time? How do you want me to answer? Essentially blockchain without a currency?
Yeah.
Sure. So basically a blockchain is just a database. and it is a database that is only written forward. You cannot write backwards. So if you want to make a change to a previous entry, you simply make a forward change that references the old entry, but it ultimately creates a new entry. And that's fine. This is actually a technology that's existed for gosh, many decades, actually. What Bitcoin did is it monetized it. It created an incentive to have a distributed group of people be paid to serve that database and secure that database, account for it, and reconcile it. And that's great because it makes it that you don't have to have a profit motive in the specific use of the network, but you can have a profit motive simply for securing it. And so that really is the unique invention of using Bitcoin as a money system in order to secure that database. But the database itself can be used in ways which are not money, or they're not monetized based. I mean, you can pay ever so small transaction fees in order to upload all kinds of data to this system and then utilize it for whatever else. Maybe you're uploading the data to the ledger for essentially free or practically free, but then you're reselling that data from the ledger for lots and lots of money. A good example might be climate data, for example. It's not the most valuable thing to pay to write to the ledger, but over time, especially as the world debates the best way to combat the effects of global climate change, well, the data is very valuable because it's completely secure, it can't be rewritten, it can't be corrupted, it can't be maliciously changed. So all of a sudden, Bitcoin becomes this database of maybe the most valuable information in the world. It, in theory, could be the data that helps save the human species, and it's on this perfect database. And it was written there for essentially free, but it can be resold from there or repurposed from there in ways which is infinitely valuable. So that's my answer to that.
You need an economic system, as you said, to incentivize the miners to be providing the database, and that's what you need, the Bitcoin economic system. That's what ensures the security of the blockchain and creates the data economy for it. Also, the utility comes first before any commodity becomes even money. So without money, you cannot even have a store of value. So that is a big problem we notice with the economic model made of Bitcoin by BTC, is that it can be a store of value without having a utility and the ledger. And the problem now it's going to happen is because there's not fundamental economics powering the BTC network, it's going to go into a chain death. It's inevitable because the block rewards are reducing and you can't have the transaction fee increasing and at the same time the price increasing because one of it has to go. And it will inevitably lead to economic collapse of the BTC blockchain. So it's so necessary to scale the block size and build an economy and a demand for the ledger, a demand for the use case of the ledger. Environmental impact is what is another prevalent misconception about Bitcoin. Would you like to address about that, Kurt?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the most important things to realize is that there's a criticism that there's an immense amount of energy spent in the blockchain space on proof of work mining. And I have to strongly agree and strongly disagree at the same time. I'm going to agree with the critics by saying that absolutely, it is an incredible waste to be spending all of this money and turning electricity into heat for maintaining a ledger that, again, is not creating new value. But I think if you look at it and say, well, but we do make this trade-off that some value is necessary in order to burn to create some other thing. So a great example might be the train system. We know that the train system does pollute the environment. It does absorb electricity. It does produce carbon. It does these things. But we need trains. Trains are a crucial part of the economy. And so we, the big blockers, the BSV economy, we look at this situation and we say, well, then what we want to do is we want to make sure that the most possible people can fit on every train as it's going to leave. If it's going to leave the station every 10 minutes, then we need to put as much value into that train and produce more value by what is put into that train every 10 minutes. And every other blockchain is doing something very different. So with Bitcoin BTC, again, there's 1 megabyte of economic value that can be created every 10 minutes. But in BSV, that number is infinite. And as you can see here on CoinCarbonCap, this is a publicly maintained open data website that explains how much carbon, how much electricity is used in various metrics. And you can see that BSV is actually exponentially more efficient than the other blockchains here. That you get many thousands of times more ability to transact per kilowatt hour spent. And this is at a very small scale. The only reason this number isn't bigger is because there isn't currently more demand. If suddenly 1 billion new people showed up and said, you know what, I'm going to use Bitcoin SV, well, that number there would not be in the thousands. It could be in the tens or hundreds of thousands, or perhaps millions of transactions per kilowatt hour transacted, because there is no limitation. Every other blockchain there has a limitation. Back to my train analogy, you know, some of these blockchains allow 1 car, some allow 2 cars to leave the station. And in BSV, there is no limit. So if there's demand for 1,000 cars to leave the station, they will just be there. And that's the real beauty of that, is we are absolutely as efficient as we need to be at any given time, with no necessity to do any extra planning. It just scales the way that it needs to.
This example of a hospital or a train is what I love, because these are economies of scale. The more you scale, it is becoming more efficient. And imagine a train, you have only 1 bogie filled, or 10 passengers traveling in the train. It looks super inefficient. Like you have an entire train, like that's so inefficient. Or an entire hospital running with only 10 beds, as Kurt also gives an example for that one. It's super inefficient. But if you have full capacity of train used, and right now in Bitcoin, you don't even have a limited capacity, it can have unbounded block size, then it is an economy of scale. You have maximum value created at cheapest cost, and it just keeps getting better and better. You can even have tokens and contracts on Bitcoin SV, which is very interesting and new concept to people, that you can have smart contracts on Bitcoin itself, that Bitcoin always was capable of smart contracts. Every script in Bitcoin, when Bitcoins are held into what is called predicates in computer science, they are unlocked, and with a true, if you have a correct data given as input, it gets unlocked and it gets spent. And you can have custom information locks created, which get unlocked with the correct stack of data to be spent. And with this Turing complete system, you can create any smart contract system that Ethereum can, or any other blockchain can. And it always did, but it was suffocated, as Kurt will also would tell you about.
For sure. So Bitcoin has script language. So with every transaction, you can program a script that will execute a higher level function. So essentially, if this, then that logic that can make its way across any number of operations. An example of this would be the op return. We see op return used heavily in Bitcoin SV. A lot of people like to put a JavaScript-based token into op return that can interact with other JavaScript tokens. And this is something that existed in Bitcoin. In fact, in 2013 and 14, there was a protocol called Counterparty that worked in a similar way. And it created a big debate for the Bitcoin core developers who were obsessed with keeping the total size of the blockchain database as small as possible. Debated, hey, how can we eliminate this token protocol? We do not, under any circumstances, want tokens added to Bitcoin. They saw it as spam, regardless of what value was created. They didn't care if it was going to create $1 billion a transaction by transferring global wealth through tokens. They didn't want it. And so they reduced the size of the op return field from, if I recall, it was 80 kilobytes, and they brought it down to 20 or something like that. So, and even 80 is quite small, but so that's just one example. They reduced it, but they also reduced things like the number of operations that could occur per transaction, or the order of operations that occur in a transaction, and made it that there were basically what is called a standard transaction today, but They just said that the logic of a Bitcoin transaction needs to go in a very specific order. It needs to follow very specific and very tight rules. And therefore, there was no flexibility in what you could do with the script in BTC. And therefore, it was something that people basically haven't studied until just the last 2 years. It wasn't until 2020 that in BSV that scripting language is opened back up, that these limits were removed, and that the concept of the standard transaction was removed, which is something that people don't talk about very often. But only in BSV are you able to design functions to go in any order that you would like them to, or execute them in any order that you would like them to, and how they interact with each other. And so there's a very powerful scripting language in BSV that allows you to program smart contracts. And there's a huge opportunity to becoming a Bitcoin script expert, because there's maybe a few dozen people on Earth that even know that this is possible, but you are able to create billions of dollars worth of value by creating smart contracts that allow economic opportunity that couldn't be done in any other way.
Bringing it over to an end is we see how Bitcoin SV is capable of being the blockchain that powers the entire data economy that we envision, the metanet economy, because it is scalable. It has sustainable economic model with the least transaction fees. Also, it is instant. This is another misconception actually which is there, that you have to wait for the block confirmation, which is actually not needed because the transactions are propagated in less than 2 hops. In 2 hops, the entire network knows, and you have a guarantee of a transaction finality without having to wait for the block settlement to happen. It is secure, and you have smart contracts with compliance. Regulatory compliance is adhered to with the Bitcoin blockchain because it's all transparent ledger, and we can build the government's e-governance systems. The entire society can be run because the entire narrative of crypto, again, the honest word is mentioned in the Bitcoin white paper 14 times, as Kurt will tell you. So it's never designed to go against society and against law. This is another misconception which is very prevalent. And with that, we're being to an end.